Thanks very much for those introductions, Julia. So we'd like to tell you a story. We'll start with Once Upon a Time. This is a story about how our team delivered a new search solution for John Lewis and Partners, the ups and downs along the way, and about the context we're working in at the time. So there's quite a lot of story to fit in, but as Julia said, we will try to leave some time for questions at the end. So John Lewis and Partners has been a retailer for over 150 years. Recently, the high street has been undergoing a lot of change. Long-established names have gone under, and clicks have overtaken bricks, and pure-play online retailers further disrupted the status quo. Businesses that didn't change risked an uncertain future. So when John Lewis bought a website in 2001, many partners, as John Lewis employees are known, felt it would never rival the store estate and that online shopping would never catch on. That could not have been further from the truth, and that website business became johnlewis.com. So 5 or 6 years ago, on the second generation of the website, John Lewis was faced with a major decision. Do they undertake a complex and expensive upgrade of the on-premise website, or do they take a bold step to enter the cloud and embrace new ways of working? The board backed the cloud-based strategy and chose Google as the provider. And so work started on the third generation of the commerce stack, enabling new product-oriented teams. So search was identified as a complex yet relatively discrete proving ground for that strategy, and would be an ideal learning opportunity. Retiring the existing search system would also save significant licensing and maintenance costs. It was the ideal candidate for the first product to move to the cloud. We found ourselves influencing change and adapting to other changes around us, while still respecting the important demands of peak trading periods. We figured if we could demonstrate we really could achieve faster, more sustainable delivery, make support easier, and do all of this through the peak trading period, then our legacy would be more than just a new search service.
So before we start, a little word about peak and why it's such a thing for us in retail. Many retailers trade for months without making a profit, especially early in the calendar year. But when there's events and reasons to celebrate, people go shopping. Hence, there are peaks and troughs to navigate. And if you can make hay in a peak period, you can offset the losses of the troughs. And do that well, you can make an overall profit across the year. The biggest of those events are often referred to as the 3 peaks, namely Black Friday, Christmas, and the winter or Boxing Day sale. Thus, much of the annual profit can be generated in a few short months. So winter is therefore the busiest time in retail. Each peak trading period involves a lot of preparation. A lot is at stake, so every effort is made to ensure the success, and the appetite for risk diminishes because of this. ITIL practices are long established at John Lewis, and change management is robustly applied. There is a tried and trusted approach for everything peak, so adopting different ways of doing things would not be easily accepted. So within this context, we knew there would be challenges to overcome in order to prove out those new ways of working in John Lewis Digital. Good stories have multiple subplots that intertwine and work together, with most characters moving between them and contributing to more than one subplot. And we've called out 6 subplots that were key to how our story played out. And everything that we discuss falls into one or more of these. It's fair to say we didn't get everything right, but if we did, then it'd be a fairly boring story. But you'll see these themes running through the whole of the story as we continue.
So I like stories that have maps in the front. So here's a map. This charts the rough progress of our story. We start up in discovery on the left-hand side. We'll hear about that in a second. That was early to mid-2018. We're forming our team. We made some progress, scaled a peak, took a winding path, scaled another peak, and then hopefully riding off into the sunset, or maybe just having a nice sit down. That's what we like to do. So, in spring 2018, a small hand-picked team with a strong blend of key skills entered a period of about 6 weeks discovery. And this was a new term for us and a new part of our processes. We had to define the start and end. We hypothesized that we'd be done with discovery when we knew enough to be confident there were no gotchas and we could start building, nothing more. And without a stage gate or sign off, we quietly got on with it anyway. I mean, it was not as if it would be wasted effort. The overall brief was simple: to migrate search away from the old system and enable legacy decommissioning using lean, agile processes to do so. This was new. In the context of what we've been used to, this was truly empowering and exciting.
Our product owner was happy to go live to a small percentage of customers with a very basic version of search, and then iteratively add more features. So this would allow us to deliver soon rather than just fast. Having a group of influential stakeholders championing this initiative was crucial. We knew we were being given the keys to the next level for John Lewis website teams, and we had a duty to bring everyone with us. Regular early showcases built everyone's confidence, including our own, and we really believed in what we were doing and that we were in the driving seat.
So in discovery, we determined the feasibility of our approach and our proposed technology choices. We plan to implement our new search service using microservices, running on Kubernetes in Google Cloud. This was the chosen architecture of the new John Lewis digital platform, which you'll probably hear us refer to as JLDP later on. There was a separate team of setting up this platform, and we were the first team to start using it. We would certainly have chosen microservices anyway, but this meant we had fewer decisions to make about implementing them. We used managed cloud technologies wherever we could. We decided we'd rather get on to the work of delivering search capabilities rather than getting involved in low-level tasks of administering our tech stack. Why spend time maintaining databases or messaging systems when somebody else can do that for you? And also messaging and database services that are built to be multi-regional resolve a lot of availability and disaster recovery scenarios quite easily, so we didn't need to consider them. So because Google Cloud offered PubSub messaging and data store, which is a document database, both of which were multi-regional and resilient, we used those. Went with Elasticsearch as a search engine, and the same applied. We didn't need to become Elasticsearch support experts, so we sourced a vendor for running a managed service for Elasticsearch. We came up with a high-level design that described how data would enter and leave our bounded context of search. This was the context of a number of other planned services moving into the cloud too. So some of our data sources would change over time, and we need to stay flexible. Our main data sources were core product data, product merchandising data, various types of price data, and various types of stock data as well. There are a few others like reviews and popularity. We started with just 3 microservices, 2 for the indexing process and 1 for serving search requests. We knew this would increase in the future as we added more capabilities, but we kept it simple to start with. That would get us running more quickly. We could refactor when required because microservices kept our design flexible. We tried to reduce our dependencies, both technically and organizationally, because this would mean we could continue with our own work more easily and not be held up waiting for other teams. We used Kotlin for development. This has been used elsewhere at John Lewis quite successfully and was easy for developers who knew Java to pick up. Now we knew what the building blocks were. Creating a high-level plan with target release ambitions really brought things to life. This is where the context of peak trading comes into our story. Our MVP was a realistic target for pre-peak 2018, if we could convince everybody it was not too much of a risk. Our second hypothesis was that we could meet our ultimate goal of being 100% live by peak 2019. There were lots of hearts and minds to win over before then, but being a little bit live for peak 2018 would build the foundation for fully going live the following year, and we were determined to go for it.
So during our discovery phase and over the next couple of months, the team grew and took shape. And that team comprised a mix of permanent staff from JL and external consultants from Equal Experts. We ended up with 5 or 6 developers, 2 QAs, a delivery lead and a product owner. And later on, we added a bit of business analyst as well. In fact, I often commented that our skills, personalities and experiences were diverse, but ultimately complementary. And what we had in common was a sense of professionalism and respect for each other. Our product owner had a lot of search expertise and was hands-on right from the beginning and very much a part of the team. Finding its identity, the team became known as Disco, which was simply an abbreviation of discovery to start with. And it may not have been the most creative name, but it's given plenty of mileage in cheesy puns, Friday playlists and a sparkly logo. And this being 3.5 years ago, we were able to co-locate everyone in one office. We also co-opted any people we needed from other teams on a temporary basis, like middleware, to come and sit with us. This was really beneficial. Decisions could be made quickly and issues resolved collaboratively. Communicating with operational stakeholders was an essential component of ensuring success. We co-opted people from operations and so aligned them to our team from the outset. In fact, we brought them on our journey firsthand. And these same people later became great ambassadors for us, helping us to navigate other legacy systems and processes further down the line. Taking time out early to discuss and agree ways of working in the team really was time well spent. Stephen's going to talk about this more on the next slide, although in fact it could be a talk all of its own.
So there are a lot of words on this word cloud here. We'll pick out the most important ones that we felt. So we wanted to have just enough process would help us deliver reliably without overheads. Very importantly, the whole team was responsible for quality. Our two QAs brought their expertise and perspective on this, but it's very important, it was everybody's job, and we kept reminding ourselves of that. We embraced continuous delivery, employing Kanban style working with a strict stand-up and ticket discipline. In fact, we shared the running of stand-ups using a rota. This meant everybody got to do it, and everybody had a stake in the smooth running of the team. Our definition of done was that something was live in production. Very simple. We had a single backlog for all requirements, whether they were features, bugs, operability, or security features. This made it easy to prioritize them against each other based on perceived or estimated value. We used Jira, but it's not really the tool that's important. What's important, we used the simplest workflow possible and only one ticket type. There was no point getting caught up and frustrated with the ticket management process. We ensured all tickets had an epic assigned to them, so it was easy to link them back to a specific thread of work and value.
As we've touched on already, our MVP was very minimum already, and this meant we could deliver something soon, which was really important to us. Being the first service fully on the new cloud platform was a freedom, even a luxury at times, but also a responsibility. It was early days, and we worked very well as two collaborating teams of the platform, both building out something new. And learning from our experience, the platform team created a paved road for all future tenant services to follow, automating that technical onboarding process that had been done manually for us. Turns out they affectionately referred to us as their UAT. As a consequence, this became an additional part of our legacy, aside from the search service itself. We felt it was important to start as we meant to go on. And this meant defining infrastructure as code from day one using Terraform, adding unit tests, functional tests, performance tests from day one. We tried not to duplicate testing. Each different type of test should test something different. And publishing metrics and ensuring good operability from day one. It's important to get all of these in early, as it means you never have to make an argument for taking time to retrofit any of it. If it's there and it works, then it doesn't get questioned, and it's a great help. We wanted to get performance tests running as soon as we had the simplest search possible, and that gave us a high watermark, so we could tell when we added more features to search whether we were slowing it down compared with that initial version. For each feature, we considered what we want to know about it when it was live, and added metrics and graphs as part of that development. So a feature wasn't complete unless it was publishing any useful metrics. We deployed as often as possible. We started deploying to the production environment as soon as it became available, even though our customers weren't using it yet. And because we had all of our infrastructure defined in Terraform, deploying to production was simply a case of changing a few variables to deploy to the new environment, a great benefit of infrastructure as code. In fact, we proudly mentioned our quick prod deployment times as an awards interview, but that doesn't sound possible or sensible to attempt, was the reply. So deploying this way gave us the opportunity to do a soft launch to our internal users by allowing us to set a cookie which will provide access to the new API. That meant when we went live to customers, it would just be a case of directing them to our already deployed API rather than actually deploying anything for the first time. We tried not to think too far ahead. We kept things flexible and trusted that our good design would allow us to adapt to future needs when required. We didn't try to future-proof without knowing what the future held. We didn't try to put APIs around things we didn't need to. Stephen's view was that very clever people at Google have made the data store and PubSub APIs very fast, so we'd only slow them down and make them less reliable by wrapping them with our own APIs. And we also retained the same API format as the old search system had used. After all, this was replatforming. This was deliberate in order to ease adoption of that new API by the front ends that were using it. And it did mean that we carried over some badly named fields, little used content, but that felt it was a price worth paying, and we could iterate on it afterwards, and nobody really seemed to mind. So as we mentioned previously, we started with 3 microservices. We only added new ones when it was obvious that something was becoming a separate capability. We slowly built up our solution and added more as we needed. So top left in that diagram is what we first went live to customers with. 3 are microservices, and the 4th one is Elasticsearch. We knew we'd be adding more capabilities, but we didn't build out new microservices until they were required. So you can see the evolution of the next 5 iterations as you follow the arrows down to the bottom right configuration. So as you see, eventually we ended up with a lot more as those requirements were added, but as they became obviously separate concerns.
So we wanted to be live to a small percentage of customers before Black Friday 2018, as I mentioned earlier on. So we were aiming for 1%, which is small. Our product owner wanted Black Friday traffic volumes to give us data so we could learn about our service and how customers used it. We added some features to the basic search, but it was still pretty basic. We could still learn a lot from seeing it used in the real world. And Black Friday had operational appeal for us too. There was no doubt within the team that we could handle it, but outside of the team, many still needed to be convinced that new search would be up to the task. Now, build it, run it, as we've mentioned earlier, was a definite goal for us, and one that was unproven at John Lewis. We were making big steps towards it, but clearing the way for it needed more time than we had pre-peak. We found this frustrating because we wanted to be running our own service. It was ours, and we were happy and proud of it, and wanted to be responsible for it. So the situation was that, as per the rest of the website at the time, the operations team were the first point of contact for out-of-hour support. Likewise, all deployments to production would be done by operations for now. However, instead of a small army of people working through the night to do that, they would discover they could deploy our new search in a matter of minutes using our tooling and also roll back with equal speed and confidence. So this was a big eye-opener for them and made for great live showcase material later on too. Part of our preparation was setting up easy visualization of important operational metrics. We had a headlines dashboard in the office that summarized our services' health and performance. We have another slide on that later on. I'll get into that in more detail. The incumbent search API was still available. And because we kept our API format the same as that, it was easy to direct traffic to either the new or the old API without vetting customers. And we did this using an A/B testing tool. This meant we had an almost no-fail solution and could switch back quite easily if anything went wrong with ours. So we began our development in July, and by September, all that was missing was the obligatory pen test outcomes, none of which took long to resolve. We'd achieved our first defined goal. 1% of customers would use our new cloud search on Black Friday 2018. We had a sparkly disco dial for percentages on the office wall, and we ceremonially turned the dial from 0 to 1. This was only a very small step on the way to 100, but our journey had started.
We had everything that we'd need to support in place. Runbooks, support rota, metrics that we could rely on, and we all were proved out during BAU. With our 100% mindset, supporting through peak was a great dress rehearsal for future years. Many eyes were on us, but at 1% of web traffic, the risk was an acceptable one. And of course, we had that get out of jail card that Stephen mentioned. Keeping our stakeholders informed and reassured was time well spent, not that we had a lot to report. But we had other stakeholders to consider too. Knowing that if we and our product conducted ourselves well, we were laying down a benchmark for others to meet. There were many more product teams waiting to follow us onto that paved road. So if we put a foot wrong, our friends and colleagues might find their journeys made harder. We had to be good citizens, pathfinders for all who followed. For daytime support, we had a hit person rota in the team. Arguably not necessary for 1%, but an example of the 100% mindset in action. And it also sent the right message about where the ownership lay. We had performance tested to way beyond 1%. So it wasn't surprising that our service coped with 1% of traffic, but it was still very good to see it. We didn't need to scale up our service, but had the capability to do so if needed. At one point during that peak 2018, our A/B testing tool suffered an outage, which made us consider building our own solution for this, but more on that later. So having navigated our first peak without incident, we reflected on a job well done. We had learned a lot, both operationally and from real customer behavior. Before we even reached Christmas, our operations colleagues were signaling we'd be able to do our own releases to prod once peak restrictions were over. We'd earned a lot of trust at a critical time, which would pay dividends.
In January, peak trading tails off, so the business's risk appetite is higher. So peak had given us real insight to build on. Our product owner got out his long list of functionality requests, and we started to work out how we would get to 100% for the next peak. We added missing features and iterated on what we built, ticking through priorities in the backlog. Our very basic search was becoming more advanced. And we moved on to the browse side of things too. This is where customers navigate around the site by categories, subcategories, and brands, rather than typing words into a search box. This brought a whole new set of challenges to be overcome, but it added more excitement as the usage percentages climbed. Now that we ran our own deployments, we could release daily if we needed to. We still needed change requests, but we were allowed to self-approve them. That was a big improvement. So daily releases became the norm. Because the platform was very new when we first deployed to it, it didn't have many rules and conventions in place for naming, so we just made up our own. Later on, when more teams onboarded the platform, it made sense to standardize the rules and conventions. This meant that we had some work to do to retrofit things and come back into line with them. Some of these were more urgent than others, at least in our minds. If they were genuinely blocking something, we prioritized them. Others we postponed because we had our own deadlines to hit. This did cause some friction between Disco and the platform team, which were the two teams that had been so happily co-working 6 months previously. So search might sound easy, but tuning search can be very hard because you need to figure out what the customer was thinking when they typed in an apparently random word or list of words. Often a brand name is the same as the name of a product that's completely unrelated to it. Sometimes two words with a space between them mean the same as no space, and sometimes something completely different. Some brand names have punctuation in them, which makes them very complicated. So we took a lot of different approaches to this, weighing different fields, taking different fields into account, using synonyms, stemming, various approaches. At one point, we were trying all approaches at once and selecting the results that looked the best to us. Over time, we slowly improved this, which was something we knew we'd need to do, but it took longer than we planned. What did not help is that, as you mentioned, we started using our own A/B testing tool. So this gave us an illusion of control, but also something else to maintain. However, that illusion of control was shattered in slow motion as we found various inconsistencies and bugs. And in the analytics we were using for our metrics too. So we tried to put more rigor into our testing, which did help. And we learned a lot about A/B testing as well as our search. So this is an example where we didn't really keep it simple enough because we started using our own tooling here rather than sticking with the existing one. And the existing tool never actually did have another outage. So another thing we used to visualize progress was a hill diagram. The picture on the slide displays that. So this is how we tracked unknowns up and over a hill. So items started at ground level, and as we figured things out, they moved up the side of the hill to the top. And then from the top, the journey down the other side was when we were making those things happen. So that was a way of visualizing that and discussing it weekly. Breaking down quarterly and monthly goals into weekly goals were also an effective way to link our product owners' quarterly goals to the backlog. And some backlog tickets never quite made it onto the board. So we made a wish list and groomed it periodically to keep it relevant to see if anything should be moved back onto the backlog. As we iterated, we learned more. We altered the percentage of traffic, both keyword search and browse. And obviously the most important bit of that was adjusting the dials on the wall. You can see Sue doing it in the picture. So when we were confident that we'd made a new change, we would increase the percentages to learn more about how customers used it. If they did not prove out, then we reduced it again. Our product owner introduced regular data insight reviews involving everybody in those decisions. It took a few months, but we eventually got to 100% web traffic on both those dials. This gave us a huge sense of achievement. Now our ultimate goal is very much in sight. And after a few more tickets, both the iOS and Android mobile apps were fully using our new search as well. By midsummer 2019, peak discussions were already underway. The fallback to legacy search was still enabled, but we quickly proved it was no longer a viable option, so we would have the stabilizers off for the next peak in 2019. Search is operationally coming of age, and we felt we would be ready. Something else we did was put quite a lot of work into avoiding negative SEO impact. Because we're changing search results, it means all the filters, navigation links, etc., that come with the search results on the page would change too. We made quite a lot of tooling around this to make this an easier comparison. At one point, we started to change the search and browse URL formats, but then backed that out. It posed too much risk to SEO to change them, and we felt like we'd wasted some time working on those. This is another example where we could have stuck to keep it simple a bit better, but we didn't. We started using data science to inform ranking algorithms with calculations for ideal ranking. We had a data scientist and a machine learning expert join the team and worked very closely with them. A flexible architecture meant it was easy to ingest data from news sources. Sometimes we would use raw data from somewhere. Other times we would pre-process separately in a machine learning cluster and report the output of that. As we approached the first anniversary of being 1% live, and having improved our search to the point that we could be 100% live, we had a real sense of pride in what we'd come together to create. We'd been empowered and entrusted to deliver, and we knew we were doing it well. We'd had some frustrations along the way, but nothing we couldn't eventually resolve or work around. At one point, I also realized we never did accumulate the endlessly growing list of bugs that some projects have. And that was a very refreshing feeling.
So if we were being closely watched in peak 2018, we were fully under the microscope the following year. If search fails, almost all customers are unable to shop. So where failure with 1% traffic was a concern in 2018, failure with 100% traffic in 2019 would be a disaster. The biggest risk we identified was something going wrong with the deployment, the human element. But we've done hundreds of those now, and backing out was quick. We knew that. Keeping our operations stakeholders closely involved as the year progressed remained a priority for us. Operational leadership wanted to know the service could take anything being thrown at it without falling over in a heap. So we were on the case, pushing performance testing, adding resilience, adding alerting until we had complete confidence. And as we've mentioned, around this time, there were lengthy discussions about the practicalities of the build it, run it support model in John Lewis. At 50% of traffic, we figured we should be providing 24/7 support. So by late spring, a support rota was in place and we got behind this added responsibility pretty quickly. Again, many eyes were on us to see if the theory really worked in practice. How would we deal with an issue? What was the mean time to respond, restore, and recover in the event of an incident? We were early adopters of the PagerDuty app for callouts at John Lewis. There were some minor teething problems and tuning alerts was a fiddly task. But it was a very useful tool to have and a step change over existing call-out processes. And when we set up our alerts, our first question was, is this serious enough to be woken up for? I call that the 3 AM test. If yes, then that went into PagerDuty. If no, we push it to a Slack channel, pick it up in the morning. And we use PagerDuty for daytime incidents as well as out of hours to keep consistency in our approach. So a year on, the team had deservedly earned widespread respect. Our principal goal had been achieved in less than 18 months, and it was fair to say we felt fully ready for Black Friday 2019.
Here's a screenshot of our headlines dashboard I mentioned earlier. So this we had up in the office at the time, and now on everybody's screens, although this has changed since. This is what it looked like at the time. Across the top, number of health metrics, numbers of products in the index, CPU and memory usage of the search nodes. Each of these would turn red if there was a problem. On the right are our pub sub topics. Most of these relate to incoming data that's waiting to be indexed. So again, these would turn red if there are too many messages waiting. The most interesting panels for me are in the middle. These give our number of calls and response times across a week. So it's easy to spot any anomalies. Different colors of different consumers, website versus mobile apps versus call center. On the bottom is a panel showing our various incoming feeds at different times of the day, so we can see what has been indexed. While most of these were also available on other dashboards, we felt these were the most useful metrics we had. Therefore, we put them all onto the same dashboard for easily accessible overview.
So how was a full-blown peak? Well, change management issued a one-size-fits-all set of rules, including periods of complete freeze or heightened awareness, as they'd done in previous years. And put simply, any change activity, unless it's absolutely critical, was best avoided. So heightened awareness for us meant deployments could only be made after midnight and before 7 AM. Doable, but not ideal. And we realized this would be counterproductive. But at the time, our team was a lone voice in the wider scheme of things for this way of working. So as a team, we discussed our mitigation options. We'd have to plan ahead and schedule releases to clear that committed code through to production. and do that in the middle of the night. One person tapping at the keys in their Batman pajamas while the rest of the team were checking the inside of their eyelids. Our BAU proven ways of working were to be disrupted for several weeks, and the team were uncomfortable, but resigned. We would make it work. And when January comes around, we would share our experiences and reflections, because we knew there'd be many more agile delivery teams like us in John Lewis by the next peak. We were proud of our uptime record across the whole of Black Friday, Christmas, and the winter sales. We did, however, have one incident with some downtime. One of our team was doing one of those midnight deployments in his pajamas, and something went a bit wrong. Understandably, tired people make mistakes. They're only human. So for about 20 minutes, 50% of search requests were failing. But despite this brief blip, our average uptime was still 100.00%. And we've added in the 0.00, Stephen's very proud about that, to indicate the significant digits that it wasn't 99.9, it was 99.99%. We had that headline dashboard up in the office, and we got used to seeing it and have been reviewing it quickly after stand-up every day to get familiar with it. And we've been running at 100% traffic for a while before peak. So we understood our service, how it performed, and thus what anomalies we might need to look out for. Our search performance was sustained, evidenced by a consistent response time graph all the way through November and December. In anticipation of high traffic levels, we had invested time in a couple of key operability provisions. Firstly, we scaled up to support the expected traffic level. There was no auto-scaling option available at the time, so we performance tested to several different traffic levels to identify appropriate scaling levels for our microservices, both in Kubernetes and also our Elasticsearch clusters. Secondly, we duplicated the Elasticsearch clusters by that time to provide us with regional failover. Both of these things were time well spent.
So more metrics. I love metrics. The graph at the top is a longer term view of the weekly request count panel we showed earlier. This is from mid-November to mid-November 2019 all the way through to January 2020, covering the whole peak period of Black Friday in 2019, the run up to Christmas, and then the winter sales over into January. The biggest spike of requests early on was actually a live load test, and then Black Friday itself was a bit lower and spread over a long period. Our availability graph at the bottom shows some very small dips in availability, but we're particularly proud of our uptime. And as Sue pointed out, we averaged out to be 100%. The response time graph in the bottom right shows the 95th percentile had a few little peaks in it, but was pretty much flat. And the 50th percentile one was, well, almost completely flat across all the way across the whole peak period. And the only real increases there, I think, were during the live load tests that disturbed those. So these graphs are actually from a dashboard that the platforms team had started provisioning for all new services on the platform. And so new teams could easily spot basic trends and golden signals without needing to build a custom dashboard like we had shown our headline dashboard previously. So that brings us almost to the end of our story. A quick glance back at our map to see how it unfolded. So we assembled our team, started going, scaled a peak in 2018, made some search improvements, took us on some detours and diversions along the way, started live support, picked up speed, scaled another peak in 2019, and got to 100%. So let's see what happened next.
So, as Stephen says, that was 2019. What's happened since then? Well, the last bit of functionality to build was the type ahead suggestions, which we released first thing in January 2020. And having done that, this then cleared the way for decommissioning the legacy search system. Then, of course, March 2020 happened. But because we'd always accommodated remote working, we adapted easily. Our ingrained ticket and meeting discipline helped with this too. And when shops closed, well, online shopping doubled overnight, but happily, our system handled this without any problems. And soon after that, both of us actually moved to new teams. But the search team is still going strong in 2021, although only a few familiar faces remain. Machine learning is regularly applied to search results and makes turnaround for A/B testing much quicker. In fact, in the last year, over 100 A/B tests were run to continually identify opportunities for improvement in search. And looking back, well, in 2018, there were about 5 to 6 tenant teams on the cloud platform in John Lewis Digital. By early 2020, there are around 25. And today there's now something in the region of 45 digital teams and about 85 live services. And that's probably changing daily. And of those services, about 40% of them are achieving 3 or more code deployments per week. And this seismic shift in retail we're seeing currently has been accelerated by the pandemic. So this sort of transformation is really underpinning John Lewis's ability to adapt to that. And thinking back to those restrictions around deploying change, well, by peak 2020, they've been reduced even further.
So this, well, first of all, there's a picture of us. Sue was away this day, the day we went to 100% on both dials. And then a quote from an esteemed colleague who was compiling a presentation on the build and run it process of John Lewis. A special shout out to Team Disco, who'd averaged daily deployments every month for the past 24 months. I've not seen a team do that before anywhere. So that was a great achievement that the team has kept up this sustained delivery over that period of time.
So as we reach the end of our story, we'd like to leave you with a few things which made our tale one with a happy ending. We've chosen a theme for each one. However, as you've seen, as we talked through this, there are many overlaps.
Yeah, so firstly, lots of small improvements really can have a big effect. So keep trying them.
Strive to release early and to release as often as possible.
Resist complication and scope creep, and strive for velocity rather than speed.
Ensure your product owner is embedded within the team.
Treat the products as if it's live as soon as feasible, and this will help you avoid any go-live blockers or surprises.
And work as a whole team, nurturing your product and refining your ways of working together.
Finally, be proud of your product and take interest in how your customers are using it. So, we come on to questions.
Thank you so much. I loved those stories, especially the award panel saying that your deployments were too quick and too easy.
Yeah, they didn't understand.
That's amazing feedback. And your pictures of real live whiteboards made me feel a bit nostalgic, actually. I'd quite like to get back in the office and get some of those going again. So we do have quite a few questions here. We've got about 15 minutes, so I think I'll be able to get through a few.
Should I stop screen sharing then? Should we?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Great. So the first question is, from Martin Batty, were there any problems with inconsistency in search results that were thrown up by the old system and the new system?
Yes, there were. So when it comes to inconsistencies, there were definitely inconsistencies, but sometimes it's hard to decide which is better. I think, though, we'd taken a decision we wanted to be no worse to start with before we started improving. So when we did discover inconsistencies, because they were completely different systems using different ways of searching, the bit I said before about we would try a lot of different ways of searching and choose the one that fitted best, that best fits was the one in some cases, or in most cases, I think, which matched the old system best, just to kind of say, okay, at least we're not making things worse. Then we can build on this. Yeah, but there definitely were some inconsistencies.
Thank you. And we've got another question about Google from Stephen Ratcliffe, who says, how did you find the tech from Google in indexing products for JLP? Were there any gotchas? And then further, is there anything you can share about how data science and machine learning complemented search capability?
Do you want me to start on that too?
Yeah, go.
I think as far as the tech from Google went, so the actual indexing process, we built a microservice to do that. So as far as the tech from Google we used there was the pub subtopics for the data coming in, data store to store the data, and then we would index that calling the Elasticsearch API. So it was our custom code that did the transformation, the actual indexing. And it was a microservice we wrote. So we weren't relying on any specific Google product to do that for us. We're just effectively using Google's sort of generic services in order to help us do that. And the nice thing was we could scale up our indexing using more Kubernetes pods, more instances, and then scale it down again. So I don't know if that answers the question. Hopefully it does.
Yes, it does. Was there anything about how data science added to your learning?
I think so. When it comes to, so when you search for something and the users, the customers typed in a bunch of words, you get a relevance score from the search engine, and you might want to adjust that in certain ways for different things. When you're browsing through categories, then you don't really have a concept of relevance. So because it's just things are in that category, and in which case I can't remember exact things because I'm not a data science expert, but we had the data science expert and a machine learning expert, and they would work with us to say, okay, in this category, it makes sense to order the results in this particular way. So they tried a lot of different combinations of these things. And as Sue was saying earlier, we got through quite a lot of different A/B tests to test those against each other. And I think the way we did our indexing kept it flexible, so we could take all these different data sources that other people had processed or brought online, and we could use them in our searching. But there was quite a big feedback loop there from what are we doing? How do we process that? Let's use that to inform the next iteration.
It's also really interesting to see how customers are searching and what they're searching for.
Yes, I bet.
And actually to see the sort of curve of popular products or popular search terms. So, you know, in some cases, you know, really, really big peak of stuff, and then a massive long tail. And you really had to think, well, how much effort do we put into the stuff that's in the long tail of you know, this data that we've got? Do we really care? And also interesting to see how terminology and language and fashion changes things. You know, where once you'd have been searching for CD players and DVDs, you know, a few years down the line, you're not. You have to keep things updated. You have to keep looking at what people are looking for and be able to adapt and react to that.
And how quickly it evolves, I imagine, as well, as, you know, things shoot up the popularity list.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
We've got another question here about remote working. It was really interesting that your team was able to adapt so easily. Do you think you would have been as successful in this complex, challenging project and as the first of 45 teams, so in that pioneer role, if you'd been remote from the start?
I think the dynamic would have been different. I think it would have been a different set of challenges. And I do wonder whether we would have gathered speed quite so quickly had we all been remote. However, had we all been remote, I think we would have been expecting that and had those strategies in place. The last 18 months, 2 years, we've all had to look at what we thought remote working really was and rethink it, because it's not necessarily what you expect it to be. So we felt we were kind of halfway there, because we did have a couple of people who worked remotely or wanted to work remotely. And given at the time, you know, we were quite tightly squeezed into the office, it actually seemed a blessing to say, actually, a couple of people can work from home every day a week, and let's keep that rotating and share that experience and share what works. So when we did go to fully remote, we were already partway there in the mindset, but there's still things you've got to adapt and adjust.
So you'd really embraced remote working before you had to.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sir.
no, I was gonna say,
Go for it.
I certainly, we did have one person who joined us and intended to work remotely, and did say to me at the time, is it okay if I'm not in the office very often? And I said, yes, that's fine. I don't have a problem. You have the skills we need. You know, we like you. Join the team. And a couple of my colleagues were saying, oh, you can't possibly do that. That'll never work. And I thought, gosh, over the last couple of years, how wrong that was to consider that something that wouldn't function for us. In fact, it's worked really, really well.
Yeah, that's what I've always said. I think because I like working with people in the office, and I've always found it easy to just get around a whiteboard and start drawing things up, do something tangible like that, and make decisions easily. And people aren't just talking over each other by accident and things like that. And I felt when we went into fully remote working, we had a lot of momentum going from what we'd already done, because we had been sort of 3 quarters in the office. We knew each other quite well. And we kept our existing sort of ways of working going.
We couldn't do our jigsaws.
No, we couldn't. No, we used to love doing jigsaws on the table, but we couldn't do those anymore. Yeah, but
I
then
loved your
left,
hill visualization as well. Did you try and recreate that electronically?
I think that wasn't a board. I think you typed up all the little post-it notes onto. I forget what board it was, but we had like little virtual post-it notes we would slide around for a while. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then we have another one about your switch to you build it, you run it. How did the team react to having to be on call for out of hours support?
Mixed, I think, at first, depending on what their background and experience and working experience was. I think at first there was a little bit of apprehension from 1 or 2 people, but that definitely wasn't true across the team. And they worked as a team. They supported each other. They came together. We discussed it a lot and said, you know, this isn't going to be that bad. And I remember somebody saying in a meeting, actually, guys, you know, what's going to go wrong? Google's going to go down. We'll have a massive problem. We can't do much about that, but we need to be there and make sure everything pops back up again, okay? Or we're going to deploy something that will backfire on us one way or another. Either we'll find out straight away and we can deal with it straight away, and roll it back, or it's something that will creep up on us and we'll have to deal with it. But really, there isn't much else. And I think once we realized the truth of that, it was a bit of a light bulb moment for people, that really the potential apprehension of, oh my God, you know, my phone's going to go every night, PagerDuty will be pinging off left, right and center. A lot of the control over whether you get called out or not was in the hands of the team. If they'd done a good enough job and really cared and loved their product and made it resilient and put the right levels of alerting in and set up PagerDuty correctly so that it did only wake you for something you really wanted at 3 a.m, then you reap the benefits.
Which kind of is the point of you build it, you run it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And did it play out that way? Your predictions about what you'd get called out for, were they broadly true?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think back to when we did that.
Certainly in numerical terms, yes.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't get called out very much at all. I think in the beginning I was saying if we get called out more than once a month, we're doing something wrong. But also we should use those call outs as learning experiences. So something went wrong, right? Oh, something was wrong. Let's fix that thing and not get called out for the same thing again. I think the incident Sue mentioned, there was a midnight deployment thing. So that was deployment related.
But that was sort of forced upon you, wasn't it? A bit?
It was to some degree, yeah. And then I think there was another thing which was deployment related as well, but which was the daytime one and like much easier to just deal with very quickly. And I think, I think sometimes you'll get error spikes as well. And this is the thing about it being fiddly tuning things, because if you get a spike of errors and you've breached your SLA over the period of 5 minutes, but you know, over the whole day you were still 100%, you know, on average, does that really matter? So it becomes an exercise in deciding how long do you wait to figure out how bad the error was, or should you be called immediately, and just tuning things so that you're not being called out all the time for things that have just resolved themselves, you know, while you was, you know, still making yourself a cup of tea, basically, you know.
While you're still waking up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've only got 5 more minutes to go. So I'll just ask the last few questions. So I was really interested in your role as pioneers in the organisation, you know, and the first of 85 services on this new platform and following these new ways of working. Were any of your stakeholders particularly difficult to talk round to these new ways of doing things?
I don't know that anybody was difficult to talk round, but it's something to a lot of areas that was new and different. And probably if I had to say where the hardest thing was, I think it's change management, because they're so strict and you know, people are cautious, aren't they? And you know, they're the sort of guardians of not getting anything wrong and making mistakes and causing a problem. And to tell people who are completely in that mindset that you're going to deploy every day and it'll all be fine, and don't worry about, you know, us deploying in peak, we're not going to cause any problems. That just fills them with horror, because, you know, that's the big unknown for them. And you really have to take people on that journey and show them what you're doing and how easy and resilient things are in the cloud. Definitely been, you know, plenty of people we had to win over, but you have to take them on that journey.
Yeah, I thought that the peak insight was really interesting as well, how important those couple of months are to the retail year. I can understand the organizational nervousness. Right, well, I'm afraid I think that's all the questions we've got time for. And I had loads more I wanted to ask you, but never mind. Thank you very much, Sue and Stephen, for that talk. You'll find details and links to recordings of all our talks on the Equal Experts website under the Expert Talks Online tab. And if you're interested in joining Equal Experts, then go to the Join Us page on our website. Thanks again to Stephen and Sue. And thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. Have a great evening.